Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Tuesday, August 1st, 2023. And our top story today, post-traumatic brain injury depression is unlike any other type of depression. And joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Dr. Shan Siddiqi of Brigham and Women's Hospital. Dr. Siddiqi, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about some research that you and the team did on depression and the impact of PTSD and brain injury. But just in general, mental health and depression have been a big part of our society. It's a big conversation. And so hence your research. How is there different stimulants that create depression? Because we're going to talk about brain injury, but there's other types of depression as well.
Yeah, so psychiatrists have been trying to classify depression for over 100 years, and we've been partially successful. Certain classifications end up being meaningful, others don't. And one of the challenges over the years has been that we didn't have a good neurobiological mechanism to look at it. So people were classifying things based on patterns of symptoms that they were noticing, or based on, like you mentioned, triggers or things that might be contributing to the depression. It turns out that regardless of what the trigger of your depression is, whether it's related to emotional trauma or whether it's purely genetic or something else, it seems to lead to similar types of depression, or people can still get multiple types of depression either way. And so we as a field have been spending a lot of time trying to define those different subtypes using different biological approaches. We haven't converged on a complete answer, but what we found in this particular study was that in the case of traumatic brain injury, there actually is a pretty clear physiological distinction, which maps onto a clinical distinction that we've known about for a long time.
And in terms of a brain injury, I mean, we're talking about, it could be a car accident, it could be, getting pushed down and hitting your head on the ground, or it could be playing a sport like football. Any of those could be a trigger for a brain injury and hence a trigger for depression.
Yeah, one of the most common causes of brain injury in this study was military service. But sports injuries, motor vehicle accidents, physical assaults, all those sorts of things can also cause a brain injury. And it's well known that people with brain injury are at much higher risk for depression in the long term.
Yeah, and in terms of the depression itself, how is it different? Is it the same? So if I have, I know in the study it mentions the physiological triggering or the triggering of the physiological feeling of depression, but is the depression the same as if I was just depressed in general, if I didn't have the brain injury?
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer to that question is actually what motivated this study. Is that we've known for a long time as neuropsychiatrists and behavioral neurologists that it looks different. There are certain differences about these patients. The most obvious one is that they don't respond as well to treatment. The medications and psychotherapy that work for major depression without a brain injury don't seem to work for depression after a brain injury. And so these people are struggling with sort of chronic depression that doesn't respond to treatments. There are also certain subtle differences about their symptoms that you only notice if you're sort of an expert seeing these people all the time. And that's what led us to say, okay, you know what? Many of us have been seeing these people and thinking they look different in various ways. Let's see if we can go find a physiological distinction too.
Yeah, and you mentioned the focus on the military. I mean, so many of our men and women over the last decade plus have been in the field, been in combat. You read it in the national press. They're suffering from PTSD. They really need help in terms of identifying treatment, help in terms of how this is triggered and how it can be treated.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in this study, we found that PTSD was an independent driver of everything that we were looking at. It turns out that traumatic brain injury and PTSD are two totally independent things that can independently cause a lot of these symptoms. And that was another thing that partly motivated this, is that for a long time, people were saying that TBI is not causing depression. It's not the physical damage, it's the emotional trauma associated with the brain injury. Somebody who had a brain injury in the military, for example, they must have gone through a really intense emotional experience also that led to that injury. But it turns out what we're finding here at the study is that there are two totally independent things which warrant two totally independent treatments, and we should be giving each of them independent attention.
Yeah, and I like that you brought up treatment because I need to go to a commercial break, but when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about what this study and research means for the treatment of brain injury, but also the treatment of depression. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Well, Dr. Siddiqi, thank you so much for staying with us. Really appreciate you hanging around for segment number 2 this morning.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, so obviously this is an important study because it differentiates the cause and effect of some of these of depression, and you focused on military members. What does this mean for treatment? How can clinicians take this research and then focus it in on a potential treatment for depression and some of the other things that come as a result of a TBI?
Yeah, so this was one of the things, like I said, that motivated the study, is that we've known that these patients don't respond as well to our conventional treatments. And so about 5 or 6 years ago, we designed sort of a custom tailored treatment focused on something called TMS, or transcranial magnetic stimulation. TMS is a treatment that's been around it's been FDA approved for about 15 years now, and it's effective for major depression. But we were saying, can we find a TMS protocol that works for TBI-associated depression? What this is, it's a treatment that can focally activate specific parts of your brain using electromagnetic pulses. As you might know, the brain sends signals via electrical signaling. So we can use these electromagnetic pulses to activate specific circuits in the brain. And why do we want to do that? Well, we think that in the case of TBI, the depression might be a little bit more structural, related to specific brain circuits, rather than being chemical or psychological in its nature. So that might be why the chemical treatments like antidepressants and the psychological treatments like psychotherapy don't work for these patients. So we designed this treatment protocol, and in our pilot study, which we only had about 15 patients, but it worked. It worked really well. And so now we're trying to replicate this in a multi-center military trial. But before we set out to replicate this, we wanted to make sure that the circuits that we were targeting with this treatment are the right circuits, because the military is spending a lot of money on letting us replicate it. We wanted to make sure they're investing it well. So that was a big part of the motivator behind this study, is to make sure that this network that we're targeting is actually the right one. So in short, this network that we're deriving, we believe it is a treatment target, and that's why we sought out to find it.
Yeah, and to your point, we did a show recently with the Veterans Administration. I think there are over 19 million living veterans in our country. The VA in particular is the largest healthcare provider. And I have to think that a lot of these soldiers have, not a lot, but some of them had the TBI. And the VA has done some research, doctor, on the use of psychedelics in terms of treatment. Do you see your study and the treatment that you're working through kind of supporting, or the psychedelics supporting your treatment of some of these clinical cases?
There have also been some studies of psychedelics outside the VA system. There's a group at Stanford that's doing a lot of work on this. It's not published yet, and we're collaborating now. They reached out to me recently after the study came out, saying, "Can we help figure out how these things line up with each other?" I think that they're seeing some nice preliminary results in certain psychedelic therapies for TBI-associated depression. So we're now going to try to see if it's modulating the networks that we believe are involved in TBI depression, or as we're calling it now, TBI affective syndrome. So I think that's a promising avenue, but we're not there yet. We have a lot of work left to do before I'm ready to start recommending it.
Yeah, and in terms of the future work, let's talk about, I think you mentioned some of the testing that you're doing with the U.S. military, the U.S. government involved and military involved. How do you build upon this research, and what are the next steps? So like if someone's watching who is a veteran, maybe they have gone through a traumatic brain injury, they've sought out support. What's the next step in your study to try to come up with a recipe for success?
Yeah, so one is what I'd already mentioned, where we've already launched this multi-center military trial, and we're going to try to show thus in a larger sample that we can actually target this network as an effective treatment. And if that's true, then we should have this as a readily accessible treatment within the foreseeable future. It takes a few years to run a clinical trial, but once the trial is done, we would be able to start recommending this as a routine treatment. In the meantime, there are a few small clinics. I say routine treatment in the sense that right now this treatment is available, but it's not covered by insurance. So people can certainly get it, but it's expensive. We're encouraging places like the military. This is a huge part of this. It's not just about the science, it's also about the advocacy, about speaking on behalf of our patients. We're encouraging the military and other services to start paying for this, because aside from helping their people, it'll also save them money. Right now, if a young person comes back from service and is disabled by TBI, and depression is one of the leading causes of disability after TBI, the military will invest over $1 million in disability payments for that person over the course of their lives. The treatment is expensive. It costs about $15,000 to $20,000, but it's a lot less than what they're going to pay in disability payments. So we're trying to make the case that this is not only the right thing to do for our patients, but it's also cost effective. That was one of the huge motivators behind this also. About 12 years ago, a really influential paper came out in the New England Journal of Medicine. They used brain imaging to essentially prove that concussion is a real disease. Until then, people were questioning whether it's real or not, because they said, "Oh yeah, you can shake it off and get back on the field and go back and for the next play." 12 years ago, that paper came out and it proved that that's not true. It is actually, there are detectable changes in the brain for years afterwards, and the only reason they couldn't detect them before was because the technology wasn't good enough. Technology was good enough, they could detect it, and that led to major changes in military policy, changes in NFL policy, all sorts of changes. So I think the important thing is science doesn't just drive science, and it doesn't only drive clinical care, it also drives policy. And I think that's one of the big things that we want to work on, is taking this information, when you asked about next steps, taking this information and leading it to sort of help improve, help enact policy changes. Other than that, we're also trying to learn more about this syndrome. So one of the things that we want to do next is, sorry, let me take a step back. Sure. Beyond just mapping the networks like I was talking about earlier, a big part of the study was showing that this is real, that depression after brain injury is different from depression in the absence of a brain injury. That was the focus, the crux of this study. But that was the main thing that we set out to prove, is that it's different. We didn't set out to prove how it's different. So that's another thing that we still need to figure out, is to tease out all the specific differences in terms of network architecture, in terms of symptoms, in terms of prognosis, things like that. So these are all directions.
Yeah, I mean, in the research, I get listening to you talk about this. I know you're focused on the U.S. military. It's a big part of this, but I can also see it being used for the NFL, police and firefighters, other just citizens who are undergoing brain injury. I mean, it has so many other applications. Dr. Siddiqi, we're going to have to leave it there. Really appreciate you joining us. Great job on the research, and we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Anyways, thanks for the time.
And that wraps up this episode of BRNAM. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the latest curated news and lifestyle, wellness, finance, tech, so much more, all in one place, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Want to search our archives, check out our latest content, and visit our website, and of course, all of our streaming partners. We're back again tomorrow with another very special guest and another important topic. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes. Now is your opportunity to co-create content around any topic on the first lifestyle and wellness network. Reach a global audience through our platform and co-own exclusive branded content. All of our programs are available on demand and also as audio-only podcasts, so you can take us on the go. Broadcast Retirement Network, available anytime, anywhere, and on any device.